Welcome to our live webinar on sustainability. Out of the crisis, does green get the best deal? Or why the perma-crisis means good news for sustainability. We're really happy that you are joining us today, and we really appreciate it. I'm also quite pleased that today, besides listening to yours truly, you also have the opportunity to hear from the delightful and insightful Caroline Babende-Erde. As head of sustainability for Tetra Pak, she's really quite knowledgeable, of course, in the area of sustainability and business impact. So thank you as well, Caroline, for taking the time to join us today. So what to expect today from both of us? First, I will take you through some of the highlights of how sustainable shopping is really evolving. First and foremost, how eco-actives are really pushing through in spite of inflation. But I also will talk about how, of course, cost of living impact is changing the face of sustainability and what this means for shoppers. And inevitably, this leads to brands having a quite large job to be done, but there's good news to share, which I will come to later on. And for sure, I will also talk about what this means for retailers in this brand shopper equation and how to scale up solutions that resonate with shoppers. And then Caroline will, of course, interpret this changing context from her point of view on the impact of sustainable business. She for sure will talk about the sustainability strategy from Tetra Pak. But as packaging is such a huge touch point from shoppers to consumers, she will talk mostly about how they are seeing really packaging as a force for change for good and how they are using and implementing this to activate shoppers and their way forward. So I am really looking forward to that part for sure as well. And there will be time for Q&A, so be sure to drop all your questions in the chat box and we will pick them up in the end. And a little note, we will also share the presentation and the recording within 48 hours afterwards. So you have something maybe to look forward to. Many of you might know our study, Who Cares Who Does, which at this point we have reached our 5th year anniversary. So for quite a while, we have been really diving into this topic of sustainability and fast-moving consumer goods. And this year really marks a record of 35 countries joining in on this initiative that we have together with our partners, Kantar and Europanel, in which we have surveyed more than 112,000 respondents from all over the globe to really understand how to gain really a competitive advantage for sustainability. But what's so unique that it's a single sourced link between attitudes and real purchasing data using our consumer panels. So we can really talk about this say-do gap. And we have been following 3 groups throughout these 5 years that we have now really dived into this topic, which are the eco-actives, the ones that really are highly concerned about a lot of different environmental topics really, but they're also the ones that are taking most of actions to reduce their footprint and their waste. And there's the eco-considerers. It's a group that is equally concerned but finds it more difficult to act. And then there's the dismissers, a group that has a little bit of, let's say, an attention deficit and an action deficit in this area. So luckily, somehow we started back in 2019, pre-crises. So we have a good sense of what normalcy in this area really looked like back then. And throughout this perma-crisis that we are still living, of course, sustainability has really become more differentiated and changed really its face. When it started, it was very much ecologically focused, very much evolving around plastic waste. And then pandemic came around, really bringing a more, I would say, a social understanding of sustainability and a more localized version of it, but also a more premiumized version of it. And then it went the total opposite way, really bringing an economic payoff into this sustainability equation that we're having because of the cost of living crisis. And this is something that, of course, is still living on today. But shoppers are getting used to this situation. So there is a really, I would say, a more positive outlook. And in these 5 years, we can for sure distill already some major learnings. So firstly, Europe, and especially Germany in this case, is still very much at the forefront of shoppers caring and acting. In all countries except one, Denmark, the levels of eco-activeness are way higher than they were 5 years ago. And one of the countries I'd like to highlight here is the Netherlands, which has a huge catch-up race from quite low starting point in 2019 to a 12 percentage point growth up to today. But also we are seeing that I would say the concerns that acting really evolve around are changing, and they are gravitating more strongly towards climate change and global warming and away from the more particular issues of plastic. Though on the other hand, solutions, they do really still hinge a lot on these practical implications around packaging and plastic waste. But we see the tide turning, or maybe turning is not really the right word. It's more amplifying in that sense. Unfortunately, action does not always equal purchasing, especially in this last stretch of the perma crisis that we are living, because an increasing number of households are taking measures, especially when it comes to reducing waste and using less resources, but purchasing really is, I would say, slowed down by the cost of living crisis. And then there's another complicating factor, which is that there's a widening trust gap. Even though really much is expected from manufacturers, shoppers, a lot of times they don't recognize the efforts and quite frankly also distrust claims that are being made, especially when these come with a higher price tag. Because price does still remain the largest barrier to purchasing, sustainably at least. But there is a lot to gain if we start breaking down other key barriers like lack of know-how and also a lack of perceived product functionality. So let's look into all of these learnings a little bit more into depth. And for some of you that might have already followed our webinar on inflation and behavior change in early summer, you might already know that in spite of, I would say, economic concerns really still topping the charts in what really keeps shoppers awake, the concerns that really were rising the fastest are everything related to pollution and climate change. And this is really something we see reflected in record levels of eco-actives. So this is this group that we have been following over these 5 years now, and we see that this year they amount up to 27% of shoppers across Europe and 20% globally, and it's both record levels. What this means is that they are really a force to be reckoned with, because their worth by now in FMCG surpasses 250 billion euros. So that's a huge addressable market we're speaking of. And even more so, also it's a growing market compared to last year where we saw, I would say, a temporary slump in the development of eco-actives. We see that all countries in Europe that we're following, which is 16 at this moment, we see growth versus last year. And in way more than half, the levels of eco-actives have already really reached more than 1 in 4 shoppers. So that's quite sizable, I would say. And even if we take the most modest approach to looking forward and where we think eco-actives will be headed, and just condensing a really, as I said, modest growth rate distilled from the growth rates of the past 5 years, we can for sure expect that in another 5 years, 1 in 3 will be eco-active. So we for sure cannot ignore we cannot really afford to ignore this group for sure. Now, this most likely scenario or modest scenario, we can see this trajectory really developing, and also this small ditch that we've seen in 2022 when it comes to eco-active development. But importantly, and I think the lesson we can draw here is that eco concerns and action are really, really quite resilient in spite of these huge socioeconomic contextual challenges that we're seeing. And it has been changing phase, as said. So global warming is by far the primal concern that shoppers have these days. 23% cite global warming as their key environmental concern, and this is growing versus 5 years ago. And another issue that is really much higher on the agenda than it was before is water shortage. And thirdly, food waste is also a concern that is keeping more shoppers awake than before. And this comes a little bit at the expense of concerns around plastic waste, which we remember it all really started with. This does not mean, however, that this is a topic that is out of the picture, because it's still quite emotionally charged. 67% of Europeans are really upset with the amount of plastic they end up with, which is higher than we see elsewhere. But then, if we look into those that are really trying to buy products in an environmentally friendly way, it's 57%. Quite sizable, but it's actually below, I would say, the global standard. So there is also a emotional action gap that we are seeing here. Because Europe was hit quite hardly, of course, by the cost of living crisis. Now let's look a little bit more into the impact of that. And truth to be told is there is great difficulty behind these actual circumstances. Because on the one hand, we see shoppers struggling, quite rational behaviors, and I would say a brand competitive field in which price competition and pressure is really the name of the game. On the other hand, sustainability is really marked by increased complexity in regulations, obligations, terminology. So also for shoppers, it's really quite hard to navigate all of this. And then when your expected influence on a positive outcome is maybe under pressure, you are more difficult to be motivated to make that change or to make that purchase. And this is maybe why, in part, there's a little bit of a delegation of responsibility away from shoppers themselves, and we are looking increasingly towards governments to make the difference in solving environmental issues. 44% of European shoppers cite governments as the prime responsibles. And actually, a few years ago, this was manufacturers. But this doesn't mean that manufacturers are off the hook, especially in countries like the Netherlands, where they're still by far the number one actor that shoppers really look to for solving environmental problems. But the fact that only 16% really cite consumers themselves as being prime responsibles and the primary source of solving these issues means there is quite a gap in the belief in self-achievement. So what we're seeing as a result of this cost of living crisis that's not over yet is that it's less about what's happening in store and more towards what's happening in the home, or rather less about spending and for sure more about saving. So there has been less shoppers that state this year that they always take the environment into account when making a purchase. So this is for the population in general, but also for the eco-actives that, of course, more than 70% used to say, yes, I do this all the time, but also those levels have dropped. Well, now, conversely, there's more shoppers that say they always save, for example, energy in the home. And shoppers will increasingly, of course, take these decisions where they feel an effect. And for now, this effect is very much linked to wallets, because price for sure is the major barrier. And it has been as long as we track this, so that's no news. It has increased. I think that's no news either. But it also means if we look into this a little bit more deeply, it does mean that it's not the only barrier, and it's for sure not of equal importance to all. So yes, for the considerers, it's their main barrier and it's even more important for them. But also a lack of findability of products holds them back. For the eco-actives, on the other hand, it is more about being able to find the products you look for, but also, and this is quite important point, a belief in product functionality, that the green solution is equally, or even better, more so, able to perform its tasks. Now, for the dismissers, for sure price is important, but they haven't even reached that level of decision yet because they're simply not considering these solutions so much. For them, it's more a deficit of attention. They feel they're not the experts to know what is right, but they also feel more than others that they're too busy. So it's about offering convenient solutions, and within that small attention frame. So the conclusion of this is that shoppers do really need to be reactivated, because the concern is there, we have seen it, but this concern is more and more rationalized, and we need to start emotionally charging this again. And this has everything to do with feeling that you personally can make a difference. And this is a little bit more urgent in a few countries like Denmark, Czech Republic, Belgium, and the Netherlands, where we see both less, I would say, less urgency in having the environment being part of that purchase decision, but also a disbelief in the fact that you as an individual can make a difference. So we should for sure focus there on building what I call this transactional confidence. Yes, every single purchase, buying this over that matters, and you are on the right track, and all of those small decisions amount to something bigger, but it's making it small and building that confidence and having this personal engagement for sure. So the product choices that are really, really resonating at this moment with shoppers are still very much hinged on local. We've seen this surging really during the pandemic, and they've stayed quite on top, though declining a little bit in importance. It's about locally sourced ingredients and locally owned companies that shoppers really choose to buy from. And in a third place, and the difference, as you can see in the percentages, is not so big, it is about finding and buying products that have packaging from recycled materials. But as we've seen a switch in concerns, there's also likely to be a little bit of switch or more amplification of the kind of solutions that shoppers seek. And if you look with me on the orange colored part, you can see that up there it's 30% that says, I do not buy it right now, but I would really like to, when it comes to carbon neutral solutions. Now, admittedly, this is also something that is quite confusing for shoppers, because all the way on your right hand, you can also see it's the number one thing that shoppers cite, the number one product choice, as I don't know what this is. But this is declining, and it is well below the global average. So especially in Europe, and with the heightened focus really on climate change solutions that that are related to this more wider understanding of I would say environmental issues, are becoming more appealing. And there is a difference between the East and the West in Europe in this case. So for sure, everything that's related to plastic, food waste, pollution is more important relatively in the East than it is these days in the West. In Western Europe, this switch away from packaging and away from a single focus, I would say, more onto the bigger topic of climate change, is more strongly felt. And then also the openness to carbon neutral is more stronger in Western Europe. So in reactivating shoppers and bringing this emotional charge, of course, brands have a huge job to be done. Unfortunately, brands are a little bit in a pickle, because many shoppers, in this case 63% of European shoppers, believe that companies only care about profits and that sustainability claims are just another marketing tool. And this number has been growing. What is further complicating is that shoppers feel very distrustful of pricing strategies. There's more people actually that distrust brands for raising prices more than they should have. So whatever solution comes with whatever price tag, it is bound to, well, at least face some opposition. Also importantly, there's low brand recognition. And this is especially true for beverages. So 7 or sometimes even 8 out of 10 in many of the categories can't even name a brand. that they feel are doing a good job. And retailers actually have it a little bit easier there because they're almost 40% can actually name a retailer that's doing a good job. Now, ecoactives, just like all of us, are just humans. And as we have seen a switch to private label, this is also the case for ecoactives. Even though might price be less of a barrier to them, they are still also feeling strongly the effects of cost of living. And they also feel it's more difficult to act sustainable. So these private label shares can go up to above 52%, as we're seeing in the Netherlands for this group. But this is, of course, just a reflection of national private label levels. But what's more important, if we look into the dynamics, how much are they growing and how fast is the private label share growing for these groups? And we can see in half of the countries, it's double-digit growth. And in many of them, actually, it's the ecoactives are the group that is increasing their private label shares the fastest. Luckily, and I think from now we'll look into some positive news, there's many brands that are quite still successful in reaching ecoactives. So you can see some of the key brands that are over-indexing in reaching ecoactives. Some brands we have talked about before, like the Flower Farm, which is a Dutch brand, Share, which is a German brand, and also Italian brand like Granoro in pasta solutions, and Serla in toilet paper in Sweden, are one by one brands that have been growing last year, that they have been growing amongst eco-actives. But I think the important lesson to draw here is that, of course, as we all know, brand growth mainly comes when you're able to really resonate with more than just one segment. So they're all also growing amongst, for example, the eco-considerers. So taking the example of the Flower Farm, rising penetration, but amongst the eco-actives, it's an increase of spend, of loyalty. And amongst the other groups, they're actually expanding into these groups as well, reaching more considerers and reaching more dismissers as well. Now, looking into what makes these brands successful, they have quite different, I would say, appeals, but what they all share is that it is simple to understand, and it's the most highly resonating issues that they are focusing on. Single issue focus, like the Flower Farm, a pay it forward focus, like Share, and focus, for example, on very more local ingredients that we just saw before is highly coveted, which Granoro is doing. And Serla making a combination, a smart combination between eco-activeness, sustainable solution, but also having your money worth more. Now, the question, of course, whether sustainability also makes a good business case is a really valid one, and one that we get asked a lot, to be quite frank. And of course, I would like to see this from what we always know best, which is the shopper perspective. So what does it mean to be able to achieve growth? Well, we know for brand growth mainly comes from growing penetration, attracting more buyers to your brand than you lose. So by new buyers, recruiting new buyers, and also making sure you have less buyers leaving your brand or your category for that matter. And in this sense, we can also really look into, is sustainability then really able in all its facets to drive penetration, both for brands and for categories? Is it able to attract new buyers, and how important is it in attracting new buyers, especially when you compare it to all these other drivers like taste, quality, price, promotion, etc., convenience? And how important is it in keeping buyers? Because that's the other part of this equation for brand growth. And we have looked into a lot of categories, taking a category perspective, being it yogurt or frozen foods, cream cheese, fabric softeners. And in each of these cases, we found out that sustainability for sure is one of the key drivers in growing categories these days. But this doesn't go for all categories. For example, in shower gel, it wasn't the case. Now, of course, as a brand, you want to know, but how can we differentiate? Because this is what's so difficult these days with such a high focus on private labels. And we took the example of the juices category, not by coincidence. I'm looking at Caroline, for sure from Tetra Pak, a category where they are highly present in. But if we look into the juice category, what we found out, and I was really surprised by this, is that brands that care win, because you can split this into what successful brands can do to drive category growth. And we found out that the main drivers in both keeping shoppers and recruiting shoppers, so that's the top right corner of this chart, many of those drivers actually really closely relate to sustainability. It's eco-convenience, it's refilling, reusing, recycling, it's organic, and it's about sustainable ingredients. And if we look at the same chart, but for private labels that are successful in growing the category, it looks different. It is not the same. Brands can for sure differentiate. And sustainability is something that is quite up there in its ability, at least in this category for sure, to make that happen. Because private labels and successful private labels, in this particular instance, much more to do about this price quality ratio and offering ample choice and convenience. So where are retailers at? We've talked about shoppers, we've talked about government, we've talked about brands. Well, retailers have quite a privileged position, as I highlighted before, because of course there is maybe less expected from them. At least they're not top of the chart when it comes to who should solve this, and they're more recognized for the efforts that they are actually doing. So what shoppers expect from retailers is, of course, as well as always, favorable pricing, but it's mostly expected that they reduce their waste within their own ranks. So at number one, what shoppers want to see is retailers removing excess packaging from retailer-owned products. Secondly, it's reducing price when products are nearing expiration, which is highly economically driven, but has a sustainable component to it, which shoppers recognize as well and makes them feel good. And it is reducing supply chain waste. As we saw, concerns around food waste are also rising. And retailers have a quite particular role to play here as shoppers shop their main meals typically in one store these days. And shoppers already really embark on a lots of different activities to reduce food waste. It's storing foods correctly, and maybe not running your dishwasher when it's full, and checking best before dates. Making meals with what is left over, planning meals in advance, etc. And they all always are a little bit, I would say, they have a combined motivation behind it, economically driven, sustainably driven. And some are a little bit more sustainably driven than others, like for always using the eco wash setting on your dishwasher or reusing plastic packaging. And there's one that caught my attention, which is planning meals in advance, which way more than half of the shoppers regularly do to avoid food waste. But it has a little bit of a lower connection with sustainability from how shoppers think about this. And this is actually something that we see a breakthrough in. And maybe many of you heard about it, maybe some haven't. The planetary health diet, which is the Lancet Commission's thinking and suggestions about how you can really change your diet, that it's more healthy long term, but also for sure more healthy for the planet. And this diet thinking is really adopted by retailers, in this case in Germany. So Edeka, that already has quite a strong stance with the eco-actives, but also Rewe, that's just on par with the eco-actives, are implementing this into their recipe thinking and I would say meal planning. And interestingly here is we look at this concept of planetary health diet, and we thought, wow, it would be wonderful to understand where we are today, where shoppers are today, in actually how do they buy? Is this already anywhere close near this planetary health diet? So if we condense it into any food products you really use for your major meals, so let's leave aside snacking and these things, but your major meals, this is what the planetary health diet should look like in terms of volume distribution, what you buy. Actually, you can see in the middle, German shoppers in this case are, well, still a little bit away from that ideal of healthy living and sustainable purchasing. But we already see good news. Eco-actives are surely but slowly, moving towards that in buying more vegetable fruits and, for example, reducing meat consumption. But this might not be so shocking, or maybe even for me, it was less than I would expect. But when you take a generational lens on this, the results become much more telling. If we look at young shoppers, so shoppers below 30, and look at what they have done, let's say, or how they were buying in 2017, so 6 years ago, to what they are doing today, young shoppers today, we see a major shift in their diet. More vegetable, more fruit, less dairy, less meat, more pulses. So they are way ahead of the rest of us in getting close to that planetary health diet. And for them, these sustainable solutions have always been around as long as they are shoppers, right? For the older generations, it's different. They operate more from a sense of guilt. Whereas for the younger generations, it's more cheating. I do the right thing, sometimes I cheat. I've always done it like this, but now I feel guilty. That's the motivation or the underlying motivation or emotion that's there for the older generations. And it's harder to change. So, coming to my final words for today, how can we then look at all these different, I would say, evolutions that we're seeing over the past 5 years when it comes to acting eco-friendly, but also buying eco-friendly? And it's all about scaling up. And if we look at this, I have to say, self-crafted, very non-scientific way of looking at eco-behavior, it's about driving behavior change. And if we just take these words eco and think about like what could we make them stand for, it is for sure about the emotion behind it. But we have to be careful because the emotion is there, the concern is there, the willingness is there. We're seeing this and it's resilient. But if you are not able or capable to act and you don't see any results, this emotion becomes a frustration, right? So together we have to work on bringing solutions to the market that shoppers feel part of, but that also puts them in a place that they feel themselves capable to act in an environment that enables them to act. And then you have a positive spin, because the bigger you have a positive outcome expectation, of course, the more likely you are to undertake that extra effort. So it's all about making solutions that are rewarding. It's about tapping into the feeling good, not about removing the guilt. And it needs to be inclusive to achieve true growth. It can't just be about the eco-actives. It's also about how can we address the considerers, the dismissers. And it's very much about look at you, look at what you're doing, and less about look at what we have accomplished. And for this, it needs to be transformational. So the shopper needs to feel part of whatever choice they have as a contributor and not just as a spectator. And all of this sense together culminates into the sense of money well spent. And if this sense of money well spent is higher because of the rewarding feeling, the inclusiveness and the transformational aspect of it, of course, price as a driver becomes less of a distractor than we have seen before. Driving behavior change, I think, is a perfect topic to hand over to Caroline, because she has ample examples of what they're doing at Tetra Pak. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lenneke, and great insights already. And I think we would need more time still to dive into that, because there are so many valuable information you presented already. And of course, it really most of those you showed there is really what we are dealing with since we are, since Tetra Pak is on the market in the end. So hello to the audience, and I would now really like to give you a short introduction, first of course to Tetra Pak, and then what indeed we do in practice, and how we can translate all these concerns, maybe also to changing consumer behavior. So I think I don't need to talk a lot about Tetra Pak, but what is important to us is that, right from our early days, we have already been developing cutting-edge technologies and solutions to make food safe and available. And this is really linked also to avoiding food waste. I think this is a very, very important topic, if not even the topic. So to provide it safe and available everywhere on the world. So now and more than ever today, we strive to do that in a way that protects what's good. So not only the food, but also people and the planet. We do this by developing food processing and packaging solutions that meet the needs of our customers around the world, while remaining dedicated to doing that in a sustainable way. So using the latest available science and technologies, our dedicated team, of course, of innovators, research and development, and collaborators, partners, customers, we need to work together along the entire value chain to find answers, of course, to all the big challenges we are facing and you are all aware of, to the global food and beverage industry today, to just name a little segment overall. So in this entrepreneurial spirit is that we have taken from our beginnings in the 1950s already, moving to a multinational company where we meet the needs of hundreds of millions of people in more than 160 countries. And with, of course, the support of around 24,000 employees around the world, we intend, of course, to remain at the forefront of innovation, put the full weight of our skills and capabilities towards creating the world's most sustainable food package, and of course developing all the systems and processes that are needed to support it end to end. So it's not only the packaging material, the package alone, but from the very beginning. So from sourcing, making the food really available, fulfilling, UHT and so on and so forth, pasteurization, until end of life. So this is really our purpose, and this is what we are working on. If we just look at some numbers, and I already mentioned a few in terms of employees and also countries where we are active. So in 2022, we sold globally more than 193 billion packages with a net sales of more than 12 billion. And I think this is already very clear where our task lays, and what is really important to us also in terms of sourcing, responsible sourcing, in terms of end of life as well. So I will just give a short overview of that as well on the next slides. And later on, of course, we can also cover in the questions. For us, of course, already for a very long time, our purpose drives everything we do, and it's, of course, at the heart of every decision we take. So we believe that being able to access safe and nutritious food, that should be considered a right, not a privilege. And we want to play our part in helping to make sure that this food reaches everyone who needs it, no matter where they live. So this is why we commit to making food safe and available everywhere, and we promise to protect what's good, food, people, and planet. And this is why we are there, why we are on the market, and why we have been on the market already for more than 70 years. So this is what drives our business decisions, and why we do our work every day. And if we look at our strategy and our let's say, how sustainability is embedded in our purpose. So our approach to sustainability is to yeah, embedded or embodied by our purpose that we commit to making food safe and available everywhere, and that we promise to protect what's good, protecting food, people, and the planet. And this is what you see here on that slide. And this guides, of course, our business decisions, unifying the people, and will be the driving force, of course, also for our innovations. And this is really the core, the heart of our strategy 2030. And it's 4 pillars of quality, sustainability, integration, and optimization, and innovation. And so what you see is really in the center is are the food systems. And of course, around is circularity, nature, and climate as one of the main focus pillars related to planet, so to the environmental dimension of sustainability. And last but not least, a very big topic is social sustainability, which of course in many decisions, it's not always still high on the agenda, what it needed to be as we see it. But of course, this will really come higher on the agenda. Also, I would say in the view of the consumers and also consumer decisions in the next year. So we support the Sustainable Development Goals, of course, of these United Nations, building on more than 18 years of commitment to the UN Global Compact and its 10 principles. So just a quick look into how our strategic objectives, looking at our portfolios, look like. So on the one hand, we want to secure the solutions that on the one hand address the regulations, but also climate change. But connected to that, and you already presented it, Lanneke, is also the water topic, which is a very, very important one. And then on the other side, that we secure circularity in our portfolio. So, of course, we need to see how can we even improve already absolutely very sustainable and outstanding package, because the highest share of our packaging material is a renewable material, raw material. But of course, we strive to make a fully renewable or package made of renewable materials or recycled materials. So it should be fully recyclable and of course carbon neutral. And here we are heavily working on now to find solutions that recycled content can also be included in our packages. So not only in the secondary packaging materials, but also in the primary ones. And of course then enable recycling by design. To improve also here the circularity. And so now really going to activating and also informing and maybe even motivating people to behave or take purchase decisions more sustainably. The big advantage, of course, of our packages is that we can create a lot of or put a lot of information on the package. Of course, the package is the design is the design of our customers, so of the filling industry. But of course, we can use or collaborate with the customer to place information there, or we even put our own information. So we buy, in a way, this space on the package. So here we have an example on recycled polyethylene, which has been new to our packages and has been launched 2 years ago. And this example with customer Emmy in Switzerland has been launched last year. And here we put together with the customer information around the new material. So what is it all about? And what does it mean? What does recycled plastic mean? And then, of course, you can get more information when you scan the QR code, and also activating the people to inform them that, well, if you have emptied the package, please collect them or dispose it correctly in the respective bins in your specific country. So this is really an important and a valuable space. We see that most of these packages are used either in the morning when you have your breakfast and you eat your cereals, or you have your juice, as you already mentioned, Lanneke, and people really take the package and read what it's on. And so therefore, I think this is really a good asset and opportunity to activate people. And here again, we connect then through the package, the B2B and also B2C social media activation. And so usually that would have been a video where you see, if you click on the link, you can even get more information if you don't really want to restrict your lifestyle. So how can you be sure that already this package and this product is already helping you to have a consumption in a more sustainable way? And yeah, we have a lot of good examples here already. So either we make quizzes, we put quizzes on the package. So for example, what if you could help protect our planet? So then the consumers play the quiz, and we, of course, in the back, we collect the data, and then they always can be motivated to read more, and then they are linked to a specific web page, so a landing page. In our case, it's Go Nature, tetrapak.com, where you can get more details about the information or what they saw in the quiz. So it's launched automatically when the QR code is scanned. So we have really a lot of interesting examples, and this is really very much used also in different countries with different purposes. And we see really a big motivation and also a good opportunity for sustainable messaging, because people want to know more about where does this raw material comes from, how is it sourced, what is it about, how does the production work, and what about end of life. So you have a lot of possibilities and opportunities using that. Of course, this is now a different example, but also easily adaptable to whatever message you would like to convey. And so even we use augmented reality in cooperation also with Disney for several years. And so also children, but also, of course, grown up are very much interested in what to do. And you can use your smartphone to have another experience also around the package. So this has also been in cooperation with Coop in Switzerland, and educate people or children. But as I said, also grown up are very much interested here to educate them where the food comes from, for example, and what does it mean, what is it all about. But it can easily be then adapted to other topics, whatever is needed. And then, of course, here also another example regarding Disney, or here as well, Ice Königin, so sand sculpting with Olaf. Just examples, but you see the possibilities that are already there today with artificial intelligence or augmented reality. And I think this is really a good way of getting closer to the customers, so to the consumers, and help them to understand more and really get more into the topics, and then also take their business, their decisions, their what to buy and what they should not. And of course, in the back, we see a lot of get a lot of information from the QR codes. So where was it scanned? When? So this is also very important and interesting. So which date it was scanned in the year. So where we see peaks of specific information, how long people spend with the quiz, and what consumers really know about sustainability. So this is really, I think, a very, very good and important topic. And I think, there's much more to tell, of course, but I also invite you to see our sustainability report, where we have a lot of information about what we are already doing. I just really touched a very, very, very little part of all our activities. And yeah, what is it all about? And I think we are really now in the decade if to take action, all of us, so not only the companies, but we want to help consumers to take the right decision and really yeah, do what you already find out, Lenneke, in your survey, and that we make the world a bit better, of course, in the upcoming years and decades, looking at biodiversity, climate, and of course to prevent that more food is wasted around the globe. So this was my part. Thanks a lot. So here, if you want to connect with me, you can also use the QR code. And then over to you again, Lenneke.
Yes, thank you very much for your very clear explanation and great examples. And we do have some nice questions as well that we have time for. So let me just read. One question is more about legislation. So looking at current legislative processes, for example, PPWR, are there any issues that you are missing in the current discussion and which might cause bigger impact, either ecologically or socio-economically?
Yeah, I think so, Lenneke. Thank you for the question. Yeah. No, indeed. I think, and yeah, the PPWR, for those who are not familiar with it, it's the current, yeah, let's say, amendment of the old Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, and it will probably be a Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation. We expect that it will be still come into force in the first quarter of next year. So currently, all the discussions on EU level are ongoing, and what we are missing is that really, so on the one hand, availability of food is not really addressed in that amendment and in that draft, and also, yeah, all the topics about food waste and also food safety. So there's a strong focus, among others, on, of course, reducing packaging waste, which we fully support. And I think this is really a very important topic. But there is not only one solution, and one solution is seen in reusing packaging again, or even not use package. So you also showed it that people would like to see more refill stations also in retail, which I think for some products might be possible, but for others, and especially perishable food, it might create more hygiene issues, thus more food waste in the end, than really helping to reduce packaging. So I think this is still a huge topic, and what I see currently and a bit critical is that there is either or, and not that we have an and, so that it's either or reusable or one way, and one way is considered a bit, of course, the bad or the worst guy than reusables. And I think, and I mean, we are talking also to policymakers on that. We are talking with our customers, and we also try to really make yeah, clear what impact that might have if really pushed through. How is it planned currently? So therefore, I think there are more topics we should discuss all together, so along the entire value chain.
Thank you. I see another question, which is a little bit more focused on the actual materials. So it's regarding sustainable openings. It's about the paper straws offering a terrible mouthfeel. Yeah. Well, I concur. But whether you consider any other materials in order to meet sustainability objectives, and what's really optimal solutions. And I think maybe bringing this question a little bit broader, I'm also interested in hearing which types of innovations indeed in packaging when it comes to sustainability do you find most promising, ticking all the boxes, right? Because I think it's an important thing. It might tick the sustainability box, but it needs to be functional, usable, hygienic, like you said, as well.
Yeah. Absolutely correct, Lenneke. And these are really, let's say, the requirements we need to fulfill. So first of all, it's hygiene, it's functionality, it's of course, having a good ratio between filled product and packaging. And I think, of course, there's still a lot to do to optimize, but also in the current legislation, we will see more recycled content also in the packages. This is one part, so that we can really reuse material, at least when it's approved for food contact, which is also not always the case yet. So therefore, we also need to improve the recycling systems. We need to improve the access to used material so that it can be reused in packaging. But here again, hygiene, functionality. So these are really the bigger topics. And paper straws are really, I think, a bigger point for discussion, but this was really the only way because plastic straws needed to be banned already in 2021. This is related to the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and the next step will be that caps for plastic bottles and also beverage cartons need to be tethered, so really attached to the package. So these are innovations driven by the by legislation, and paper straw, at least that was the only solution currently that to avoid plastic, because plastic straws should not be used. And I think a lot of people also think there might be biodegradable plastics, that's the easiest way, but we see that biodegradable or compostable plastics currently still really don't work unless in specific composting plants. So therefore, it's the paper straw. Maybe in the future there might be other solutions, but this is currently the solution. And what we are, for example, working on is, of course, that we exchange, or that we replace the fossil-based materials in our packages by renewable materials, or, as I already presented, also recycled materials. We are also currently testing a fiber-based barrier to replace aluminum foil. So these are also innovations on the one hand to really get CO2 emissions down, so carbon footprint on the one hand, and on the other hand also to increase the share of renewable materials and to reduce complexity in the package. Although beverage cartons already today, and we already do that for more than 30 years, are very, very well recyclable, and so despite of this composite structure, but there will be more to come.
Thanks. I actually have a kind of a follow-up question on that, which is asking what percentage of Tetra Pak packaging is currently fully recycled? So not sent for recycling, but totally recycled, if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, so it really depends on the country. It all starts with collection. And of course, there are many countries, even in Europe, where you don't have a dedicated packaging collection system in place. So many of the countries already have a legislated EPR system. So like in Germany, the yellow bag, the yellow bin. In others, maybe you might have other collection options, but there are a lot, and not looking outside Europe, where packages, so not only beverage carton, but other packages are not even collected. So I think this is really the first topic we need to tackle. And then, of course, this is the start, and this needs to be guaranteed that there is a collection system in place to really go towards recycling and recyclability. Then you need a sorting system in place, so that when you have the packaging collected together, that they are sorted in their specific material, or like in our case, there's beverage cartons are sorted out as a known fraction. This is really crucial, so that we have then also a very dedicated recycling system. And what we already have, and for example, in Germany, we have specialized paper mills which take the beverage cartons that are sorted out from the sorting plants. So the first step is to really get out the fiber. And then the second step is to have the polyethylene, the aluminum, and the caps also recycled. And so we have already this technology or these technologies in place. So recyclability in Germany of beverage cartons is above 90%. So this will even increase because there will be other players also recycling the polyethylene aluminum part of the package. Recycling rate, of course, is so at least according to the recent publications, which are related to the year 2020 in Germany, are around 77%. But yeah, the real recycling, so deducting impurities and so on and so forth, then it will for sure be a bit lower. But here we don't have the information. So the important point is really that we get all the materials back into the system for recycling, and this is what we are working on.
Wonderful. So with that, I think we are on top of the hour. First, many thanks, Caroline, for your perspective. Do all feel free to reach out to us, and we will come back on the other questions that I see in the chat one-on-one. So our reports are out now. So contact either me or your local representatives if you're interested in knowing more about Who Cares Who Does, or of course also about how to grow penetration sustainably in your category. So many thanks for joining, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.